This is an ABC News special report. Now reporting, George Stephanopoulos.
Good morning. We're coming on the air right now because the stock market just opened and it just closed. Within 30 seconds, the Dow had dropped and the S&P 500 had dropped below their trading limit that sets off a freeze, a suspension in trading in the market. You see it right there, nearly a 10% drop in the Dow in the first minute of trading this Monday morning. Of course, it comes as the coronavirus crisis continued to spread around the globe overnight, now nearly in 150 countries around the world, 49 states, plus the District of Columbia. There was an emergency rate cut by the Federal Reserve on Sunday night, but that did not do the trick in the markets this morning. I want to go straight to Rebecca Jarvis, our chief business and economic correspondent. And Rebecca, as I said, the Fed took that emergency action, bringing interest rates to close to zero overnight, but real concerns on Wall Street about the real economy.
That's right, George. And there's not only that move from the Fed, but a coordinated move from central banks around the world, because this is a global issue at this point in time. And the question is how the economies around the world are going to respond to this. We know that here in the United States, the cost of the shutdown that we have now seen in so many businesses, restaurants and bars just overnight here in New York and in many other American cities, the cost of the shutdowns to most American entertainment, most American activity, has a significant price, about $120 billion coming out of GDP in just March alone, according to estimates out of Moody's Mark Zandi. And the longer term question, George, for this economy, and the one that Wall Street continues to focus in on, is the length of the disease, the government response, and ultimately how U.S. consumers will respond. Because we know there's the near term hit. There is that big crater, that giant gap that's happening in the economy right now. But if the disease were to be short-lived, contained in hospitals, if that curve, as Dr. Jennifer Ashton has talked about so much, were to be flattened and the U.S. consumer were to go through this watching their televisions, watching the news, but feeling for the most part like things would be better on the other side, and then people start spending money quickly, and the government is there with a large stimulus package to help people, those who are out of work, who are not getting their paychecks right now. If all of those things were to come together, then the challenges to the U.S. economy, George, would be much lesser.
Let's talk a little bit more about that government response. Thank you, Rebecca. Let's go to Cecilia Vega at the White House right now. And Cecilia, we saw on Friday afternoon, the stock market rose about 10% as the president was speaking, announcing this expanded testing program, all of it going back in this first minute today as Congress is still considering that first stimulus measure.
Yeah, exactly, George. And the first one being the operative phrase right now. The House took up the bill over the weekend. They passed it. It is designed to protect workers and families. Let me just give you a little bit of a sense of some of the things that are in this bill as it stands right now. And we expect it to change a little bit, at least. It's got paid emergency leave. We're talking about 14 days of paid sick leave, up to 3 months of paid family and medical leave. It's got free coronavirus testing, even for people who do not have insurance. This is going to also offer extra help with food for people like seniors and students and places like food banks. But this could end up hitting a roadblock in the Senate because it lacks some things that some in the Senate have said they wanted to see, including the president's pushed for payroll tax. Of course, that is very controversial among Republicans on that side as well. But you said at the first one, Congress is now looking at another long-term fiscal package, one that goes even further than the one that is being discussed right now. So they know that this is a long-term problem they are trying to get ahead of before it gets even worse.
Massive shock to our economy right now. Thank you, Cecilia. Let's bring in Dr. Jen Ashton, our expert on this coronavirus crisis. One of the things we saw all through the weekend, this spreading across the globe, Europe now the epicenter of this crisis, but also here in the United States. Now guidance from the CDC saying no gatherings over 50 people for the next 8 weeks.
Yeah, and George, I think, again, out of an abundance of caution here, no one has a crystal ball, so we don't know how this virus will behave here in the U.S., not just waiting for numbers on financial and the economy. We are waiting for clinical data, which we expect to be released today or tomorrow on the U.S. cases. We need to know the average age of those patients, what their pre-existing medical conditions, how many are being admitted to the hospital, how many are being admitted to the ICU. That's very important information so that people can not only put their own individual risk in perspective, but assess their response as a country. And right now, with the uncertainty and the concern and the fear, it's important to just focus on what is is important now, our preparation and our effort, and especially with social distancing.
Right, but one thing that does seem certain is that our hospital system is going to be under tremendous strain. I was talking to Governor Andrew Cuomo from New York this morning. He says it's going to be overwhelmed, wants to call in the military.
Exactly, George, and we may see that. Again, you know, Dr. Anthony Fauci on your program yesterday said we want to look back on this and say we did too much. We were over-prepared. People's health and people's lives are at stake, and so I think we may see incredibly aggressive steps like that. But just logistically, there are still kinks in the system. When we heard the big retailers on Friday say that they were going to be offering drive-through testing, ABC News has learned that in Massachusetts, for example, some of those retailers are approaching local hospitals asking for their staff to help test people. So this is all evolving literally hour to hour, and we're going to see people, you know, come together and respond to that emergency preparedness plan very, very quickly.
A nationwide crisis, a global crisis. As we said, the Dow Jones stopped trading within the first minute of trading this morning, down nearly 10%. There will not be any more trading for at least 10 more minutes. We're going to continue to cover this on ABC News Live here on the network. Back to our regular programs for many of you. That's Good Morning America.
This has been a special report from ABC News.